Hello everyone and welcome to this STP2 Refresher Webinar. It's Ben O'Brien coming to you again, and welcome also to those watching the recording. Now this is a refresher, so we are sort of assuming that you've already done a little bit of homework before coming along. Perhaps you've been to our other webinars, so we're not going to be covering the content in the same depth as we have in the other webinars, but we'll certainly take you through what you need to know at this stage of the game. And if you haven't sort of got yourself acquainted with things thus far, you may want to do a little bit of backtracking through our previous webinars on the topic. So just our normal intro, we're software developers, and even though we have people who are qualified as lawyers and accountants, etc., that's not the role that we play in your lives. We are software developers, so we're not here to give you those legal and accounting advice things. So that's for you to get from your advisors or the ATO, etc. And we have obviously continued to refer back to the content on the ATO's website rather than replicate that as the ATO wants us to sort of have them as the one version of the truth. And that way we just don't have to worry about sort of keeping things updated, as they're always constantly updating and tweaking the content on their website. And we're trying as much as possible to use the same ATO terminology as well. So 1st of November 2022, it seems still that it's a long way away, but it's only a couple of weeks. That's the way this year's been tracking. So that's our magic date. We'll talk about that a little bit more as well as we go through. A few other little bits and pieces as well. This is a little bit repetitive from all of the webinars that we've had so far. It's even back in April with the first webinar, we were saying, have a look at the way you review certain items, set up new pay items, etc. And we've done as much as we can to automate, particularly the employee data updates, but there's just not enough information for us to grab on with your pay items to say for certain that if there is a change required, that we can automate that. So your pay items is where hopefully you've already done a little bit of homework and had a look at that as well. We have our FAQs on our website to assist, and they will continue to evolve. Just speaking of that, if you want to ask some questions today, you can do so via the Teams console that you have there. Please just add your email address to that in case we don't get to you today. We envisage there's going to be quite a few questions coming through, so just straight off the bat, we're not going to be able to get to everyone's question by the end of the session. And so by providing your email address, we'll be able to get back to you. And if you are watching the recording or you think of something later, go onto our website, go to our web contact form and just send the question through there. There's no question to Sybiz, but yeah, just that caveat again that we're not here to provide accounting and legal advice. So if there is something that is along those paths, then please go to your advisors for that rather than us. But we can certainly help you if you've had that advice and you want to make sure you're setting up a pay item correctly, then you can come to us or your business partners and we'll help you with that. But please don't leave it to the last minute. Okay, just a few things about the version to use for STP Phase 2. We will be releasing version 22.22 on Monday to customers. That has been with business partners, I think, for around about 4 weeks now. So we just did a soft launch to them to get it out to people that did need it. But we sort of held it back from customers just in case there was something else we needed to jam into the software before the 1st of November rolls around. But the coast is clear in that regard. And version 22.20, if you remember all the other webinars we've had, we've been talking about that version as being the minimum version required for STP2 reporting. That is still entirely true, with the caveat that if you are salary sacrificing allowances, then we would ask that you go to version 22.22. The reason for that is that the header totals for employer amounts aren't updated correctly in all circumstances where salary sacrificing is occurring for allowances. That's by no means a deal breaker because the employer totals are just a suggestion at this point in time as far as STP2 reporting is concerned. So even if you are salary sacrificing allowances, 22.20 will still allow you to submit successfully to the ATO, but we just recommend that you go to 22.22. So just a little bit of a timeline recap. The 1st of January this year was the official start date for STP2. We didn't think that was a clever idea, being midway through the financial year and at a point in time where a lot of people are on leave. So straight off the bat, Sybiz sought and was granted deferral to the 30th of June 2022. And we were all ready to start on the 1st of July, but around about the middle of June, the ATO unilaterally granted us a further extension or deferral. Basically, they said, look, we just don't want everyone starting on the 1st of July because that kind of makes sense that a lot of people would be doing that. So we want to sort of get a few of the software providers to defer a little while longer, just so that the ATO weren't inundated. And credit where credit's due, the digital partnership office, which we as software developers deal with within the ATO, they've been absolutely brilliant throughout this process, and so we were happy to do a favour for them when they asked us to extend a little bit longer. So with that, from the 1st of July, we have had a bunch of employers reporting, including Sybiz itself. We've been reporting STP2 data since the 1st of July with 100% success of those submissions. And even though we only have a small percentage of customers, we do have a great cross-section of employer size and industries and pay frequencies. We've had some people that have been reporting from their first pay of July. We've had some people that have transitioned partway through the financial year. So we've got a really good sort of test bed there of different types of things that have been thrown at the STP2 reporting through Sybiz VisiPay, and with great success. So that's, I guess, where we're at. And the 1st of November is the next big date in terms of when STP2 is live within Sybiz VisiPay. So again, this is a little bit of a refresher. The kind of things that you needed to do or need to do in the transition to STP2 is just we'll have a bit more of a look at these things in just a moment. But company detail review, just make sure that you include the contact name and the email address. Have a look at your employees for their tax details and employment basis. And again, we'll have a bit more of a look at this. Review your pay items. This is probably the big thing, and the major change in STP2 reporting is around the fine grain reporting that you're getting with your pay items now. Previously, we were able to sort of maybe be a little bit sloppy in our processing, but the reporting would still come out in the wash and people would still get paid. STP2 keeps us a little more honest in terms of we need to be a little more diligent in how we process our pays and how we categorise things to get them to report into the correct buckets. And also have a look at your processes, particularly around non-super salary sacrifice and something new in terms of the leave payment types. So let's have a little bit more of a look at those bits of information in just a moment. But a couple other little bits and pieces around your transition to STP2. We have had a few people ring up and say, hey, I've kind of done what I think I need to do, but how can I be sure that I'm on the right path? And since version 2220, we have included 2 custom reports. One is for active items and one is for all items, whether they're active or inactive, for you to review. And it just has a look at some issues that may need to be addressed prior to STP2 reporting. Because version 2220 was released before the end of the financial year, we also included some tidbits about the transition to the 22-23 financial year. That was done in anticipation of us being live for all customers on the 1st of July, and thinking that some people might be distracted about some of the transitional arrangements for 22-23 that weren't necessarily related to STP2. So just an example of the report, and there's also a little bit of a link there if you want to get some pointers as to what this all means. So don't worry about the detail here, but it's just giving you a bit of an idea as to the kind of things where it'll have a look at things that you need to fix and also things that you need to review. So it might be that you don't have a pay item for one of the particular reporting categories. It might be something that you'll never pay in a million years because it's not relevant to what you do, so you don't need to add it, but it will sort of highlight and say, hey, look, if you're likely to have people with or getting paid a bonus and commission, for example, and you don't have an earning item set up for that, then how about you might want to consider adding that in. And so that's the bit of an idea as to what that custom report does. A few other little bits and pieces as well, and this is, I guess, the if you only pick up on one thing I'm saying in this webinar today, it is that Sybiz VisiPay automatically starts reporting STP2 for pay events dated 1st of November and beyond. So there's nothing that you need to do. You don't need to go into any settings and tweak anything to turn STP2 on. That will happen automatically. That was hard coded into the system. And for those that are already reporting in STP2, what has had to happen there is we've had to just go in and tweak a setting in the background to switch on STP2 early. So that's the big point I want to sort of make today, that it is automatic from the 1st of November 2022, of course, providing that you're on at least version 22.20. If you're on an earlier version, you won't be doing STP2 reporting, and we wish you all the best in that, but we certainly encourage you to get on to 22.20. So another thing that could cause a little bit of confusion is employees will start to see more detail in MyGov. So if they are quite diligent and they have a look at their MyGov account from time to time, they're going to see some more information that might cause them a little bit of confusion, particularly with the way some of the things are categorized in STP2. So for example, if say leave loading is provided purely related to the loss of opportunity for overtime, that would get reported as overtime. And you may have someone that takes some leave with leave loading, they jump onto MyGov and they see some overtime reported, and they know full well they haven't done any overtime recently. So they might come running to you and say, hey, what's this? I haven't done any overtime, you've overpaid me, whereas in actual fact, it's their leave loading. So a few little quirks with the STP2 reporting that might cause you a little bit more on the admin front in terms of inquiries from your employees. So as I said, there's no additional work required for you to switch from STP1 to STP2 reporting. You don't need to zero out any year-to-date amounts. Some other products have required that. We haven't done that, and you just basically continue along as normal. Once you've got, of course, all your pay items and everything set up, ready to go, it is just a matter of processing your pays and following the exact same process that you're doing now for your STP2 reporting. So initially, as I said, Sybiz got the deferral through to the 30th of June, so we could start reporting on the 1st of July for everyone. We thought that made a lot more sense to not have a transition partway through a financial year. So when the ATO said, hey, can you defer that a bit, we had to do a heap of extra work to cater for that, what we were trying to avoid in the first place. But we've done that work, so you don't have to worry about anything in terms of that transition. So that is all good there. And just a reminder as well is that we haven't turned on the child support reporting, and I'll give you a little bit more of information about this. This is a little bit of I've rejigged the imagery, but it's taken straight from the Services Australia website, published last month. And this is, I guess, a nice way of them putting it, where they are experiencing some issues and they're working on them to try and resolve them. But essentially, even though that's a nice fluffy statement, there has been some very almost nasty interaction between employers and the child support area of Services Australia in the early stages of STP2 reporting. Another government agency said that that arm of Services Australia had gone rogue in the way they were behaving. So yeah, we obviously don't want to inflict that on our customer base. So we made the call even before our first webinar back in April that we'd be deferring this, because we'd been keeping an eye on what had been happening in the world and weren't happy with that pain being inflicted on our customers. So this will be coming once those little things have been ironed out and Services Australia are behaving themselves and not making life hard for employers. We will add that child support reporting and obviously let you know at the time that that is done. So just a reminder that that is not there at this point in time. And as it says on this slide here, you should continue to submit your child support reporting as usual if you do need to do that. So a few of the early insights, around about 90% of the issues that are arising under STP2 are coming from things, perhaps pay items not set up properly or employees not set up properly. And this is just industry-wide. As I said, we've had 100% success with the submissions that have gone through VisiPay so far. So yeah, just be mindful of that, if you have everything set up correctly, then you're going to have a smooth ride. But if you sort of try and wing it, as as I said earlier, you've been able to sort of get away with a few things in the past and perhaps recycle pay items and use them for different purposes, and things still sort of go through to the right buckets from a reporting point of view. We can't get away with that in STP2, so that's where you need that little bit more care and attention to setting things up properly so you'll have a smooth ride. Some of the areas of confusion: public holidays have been processed as leave by some people. Categories of allowances have been set up incorrectly. There was, I think, some poor communication early in the days of the ATO's communication about STP2 that made people think that every allowance was reportable, and some people were sort of using allowances for reimbursements, and they've started reporting those as well. Basically, the reportability of allowances hasn't changed, and the tax treatment of allowances hasn't changed. We are providing more information with allowances as we report them, but certainly if something wasn't reportable as an allowance previously, it's not reportable now. If it wasn't taxable previously, it's not taxable now. And also the separation of earnings is the big thing as well. Just you will, like, if you get away with STP2 reporting without requiring new pay items, it'll be a miracle. The ATO does have a page. We've got a link for that. That has, I think it's up to around about 155 different types of pay items and the treatments, and so that's a little bit of a Bible as to a guidance as to how to set up different earnings and allowance items for STP2. And yeah, I've mentioned overtime already, but overtime is one of those confusing things within STP2. So overtime generally wins. So if something is being paid on the basis of overtime, so even if it is ordinarily reportable as a different category, so take bonuses and commissions, for example. If you pay a bonus or commission for just run-of-the-mill work, then that's reported as bonus and commission. But if someone makes themselves available for overtime and they keep doing that, and you say, hey, you've made my life easy to always accept the overtime, I'm going to fling you a bit more money because as a bonus for your overtime work, then that's something that would need to be reported as overtime rather than a bonus. So even though it is a bonus, it's being paid on the basis of it being overtime, and therefore it's reported as overtime. So those kind of things are, I guess, the common mistakes that are coming out of the industry thus far. So the webinars, if you are just sort of popping your head up now, or perhaps you're new to the role and you're wondering what all this STP2 stuff is all about, with the 3 webinars that we've had so far, the high level sort of information about what STP2 is was covered in the February webinar. The April webinar had a look at the employee maintenance changes and pay item changes, and had a bit of a deep dive into that around the time that version 22.10 was released, and that was the version that allowed you to go in and start creating some of these new pay items, etc. And then back in June, we had the overview of the pay process and the reporting process from an STP2 point of view. So that's what was covered in those previous webinars. If you do need to go back and get a refresher, they're available on our website. So just walking through now the company detail review from a few slides ago. You do need to provide the contact name and email address. That is now compulsory under STP2, so you may have been able to get away with it not being there previously, but most people will have this already populated, so just bear in mind to give that a quick check. And that is something that will be highlighted in that custom report as well. So perhaps once you've got 2220 installed, if you don't have it already, run that custom report, and that'll give you a bit of a rundown as to the kind of things that you'll need to look at. From the employee detail point of view, there is the tax treatment that has been totally reorganized in that tax details panel on the personal tab of the employee records. And essentially, we've automated that where possible, and so it's a good idea just to review if they're a different type of worker, I guess, like a working holiday maker. There may be some additional information that you'll need to provide to get those employee records completed. And behind the scenes, what happens is the tax details comes together to form a 6-character tax treatment code, and that's what's reported behind the scenes in STP. We don't expose that tax treatment code to the front end because it doesn't really sort of add much value. Yeah, just bear in mind that you may hear about this 6-character tax treatment code, but we handle that in the background for you. The other thing that is new from an employee perspective is the employment basis. And so again, we've automated that where we've gone and had a look at the staff types that the employees are related to and used a bit of logic there to say, okay, if the staff type has a typical week of 35 plus hours, and we've also, obviously, if you're paying fortnightly or monthly, we've done similar maths there, then we'll flag that employee as full-time. If the staff type is casual, then of course we'll mark them, those employees, as casual. Otherwise, we'll mark them as part-time. So that is automated for you, but worthwhile having a bit of a check, especially if you do have some of your staff types not configured as clearly as they could be. And another thing that will come into play as well at the employee level, as you terminate employees, there's more termination reasons that are provided now as well. The codes on the left-hand side are those that are provided by the ATO, so you will see some ATO codes throughout the software where you haven't necessarily seen them before. From an earnings pay item point of view, there's new categories for leave, and I guess this could be a little bit confusing because we do also have the types for leave as well. But if one of the new leave categories that the ATO want us to separately report is non-accruing leave, then that will be derived by the category of the pay item. So you have your ancillary and defence leave, your paid parental leave, and your workers' compensation. So they're non-accruing leave types that now need to be reported separately by setting up pay items with a category commensurate with that type of leave. And then there's additional specific earnings now as well for bonuses and commissions, directors' fees, and lump sum W. All of those things we talked about a little bit more detail in previous webinars, so I won't spend any more time on that now. One thing that we've also added to the setup of the, I guess your normal leave types, so your long service leave, annual leave, your personal and carers leave, etc., is the ability to select a default payment type. Just a point on that, we recommend that you only do that for the exceptions, which is a cash out and the unused leave on termination. And we dislike this terminology with a passion, but the designation of other for leave is basically your normal leave. When you're paying, someone takes leave and they're getting paid for it, that is classed as other as far as the payment type is concerned. So nice and confusing there. But essentially what will happen is if you don't designate a default leave payment type, then you will be prompted to select the leave payment type on, or rather you have the option to select the leave payment type when you're processing the pays. It will default to other, so you don't necessarily need to select a specific default of other for your normal leave payment types. So yeah, just a tip on that, read other as normal, and that might make life a little bit easier there as well. So we have had a little bit of traffic coming through just where people haven't set up separate pay items previously for cashing out of leave or leave paid on termination. And so that might be something to review as well, because as far as, and yeah, not wanting to get too specific in legalese, but there's the potential for those different types of leave payments to have different treatments as far as things like superannuation is concerned. So just review that in the context of your own organisation. And we do recommend, if there's any doubt, use separate payment items. From an allowance point of view, there has been a bit of a review there as well in terms of new allowance categories have been added. The ATO codes in brackets on the left-hand side there. So new categories for qualifications and tasks and tools. So previously they may have been reported as other, but they now have their own categories. And then just to make life interesting as well, if you do select the other allowance type, then, or rather category, I should say, then the payment summary codes or other allowance subcategories are then selectable. So you've got the 6 different options there, which we talked about in a bit more detail in previous webinars. So that's just an awareness of the types of things from an allowance point of view. From a deduction point of view, it is a little bit boring on the surface because there's only really been one key change for STP2, and that's the introduction of a category for salary sacrifice for other. So if you're salary sacrificing to something other than superannuation, then there's a totally different process now in the STP2 days. We do have a detailed fact sheet on that on our website that you can get to through our FAQs. So we did again talk about this in more detail in previous webinars. So this is just an awareness to say if you are paying salary sacrifice to something other than super, there's a totally different process for STP2 that we'll leave you to do your own research on the Sybiz website. So from a pay processing point of view, yeah, you will require more pay items. I'd almost put money on it if someone reckons they won't. Yeah, so just review that if you've not got around to doing that as yet. There's a link here to the salary sacrifice document that we have on our website. You'll get a copy of these slides, so don't worry about that. And it does require a completely different approach to what you've been doing at this point in time. So just bear that in mind. And a few little things to consider when making payments for leave as well. We've got some more information via that link, and you will need to separate leave loading in some cases, such as when it is directly attributable to overtime and when it is being cashed out. That will need to be separated. Some of you may be separating leave loading now anyway. Yeah, I guess one of the confusing things is that we've talked about is some things may need to be reported as overtime, even though it might be counterintuitive. So leave loading, the ATO terminology, if it's demonstrably referable to a loss of overtime, then that is something that needs to be reported as overtime, etc., etc. We've talked about these things in a little bit more detail in previous webinars. The ATO Quick Reference Guide, that's the document that I was talking about previously with 155 or thereabouts different pay items and their treatments for allowances and earnings. That is a really good document. It was last updated on, I think, the 4th of July, or 14th of July rather. So since our previous webinar, it's been updated again. So another reason why we don't publish that data, because we'd have to sort of keep our ear to the ground to see when the ATO update it and then work out what they've changed because they don't tell us, and then update ours. So that's why we refer you directly back to their website. And as we mentioned, that custom report, the idea is perhaps if you've not run that report yet, or you've not made any changes, run the report, see what you need to do, go and make the changes that you feel are relevant, run that report again, see if you've missed anything. There will be some things, as I said, you don't need to set up a pay item for something you're never going to use. So don't worry about it if it tells you, you don't have a lump sum W pay item if you're never going to pay a lump sum W, or in 3 years' time, if you decide to do a lump sum W, you can add it then. So just use a bit of analysis there as to whether something's relevant or not. So the reporting process, made this point earlier that it's the exact same process. It will automatically turn on to STP2 reporting for pay events that are reported from the 1st of November 2022. So you don't need to do anything else. It's exactly the same process. We've done a lot of work to make that as simple as possible in that transition. There's intelligence behind the scenes. So if, like some people might go, okay, well, what if I need to do a prior year submission for last year when I was only doing STP1 reporting and now I'm doing STP2? If you do a prior year submission, that will be reported as STP1. So we've kept the STP2 and STP1. There's a clear distinction within the background of the software, so there's different pathways that are followed, so they're totally distinct, and that's why we're able to sort of use them for the prior year reporting where necessary as well. And Some things haven't changed with STP2, so we're still reporting employees' year-to-date values. And so if you make a mistake, and it is quite possible that a mistake's going to be made under STP2 because it is a lot more complex, then the remedy data will just form part of your next pay event. So you don't necessarily need to go and do something separately. It can just be picked up in your next pay event. So that hasn't changed compared to STP1. And then as we see other stakeholders leverage the STP2 data, hopefully that's going to be kept to a minimum in terms of new changes that will be forced upon us. One of the upsides of the STP2 redesign is that it is more malleable now in terms of if different government departments come along and say, hey, we need to know what shoe size someone is, then the current construct of the STP2 data, now that it has been sort of remodeled, it's a lot easier to sort of add new reporting into STP2 without creating an STP3, if that makes sense. So that's a positive there, but certainly when you do start doing your child support reporting, the child support team have been pretty hot on jumping onto things that don't make sense. And so you will need extra care and attention. So I think we've kind of shaped this well, where let's get used to reporting STP2 data and then start reporting to the other stakeholders by collecting that specific information at a later date. So that's hopefully fairly clear there. So just again, a word of warning that STP2 data is more complex. You do need to take more care and attention in setting things up and processing pays. And you may, even though we haven't encountered it so far, you may encounter errors when making the initial submissions. Unfortunately, the error messages come through in ATO language, so they're not necessarily user-friendly, but if you look for keywords, you should at least know whether it relates to something at the employee level or the pay reporting level. So unfortunately we don't have any examples of what our customers have faced so far, because even though there's been hundreds of submissions go through STP2 reporting via VisiPay, we haven't had any submissions rejected. So so I guess apologies and a little pat on the back for ourselves there. But certainly if there had been some errors, we'd share them with you so we can all learn. Just in terms of a couple other changes as well, the Sybiz employer portal, there is now a separate STP2 submission history. So for those of you who do use the portal frequently, and I know it varies, some people hardly look at it at all, they might look at it toward the end of the financial year, some people might be looking at this slide and going, what portal? Whichever category you fall into, just be mindful that there is a separate reporting area for STP version 2, because the information that's being reported is just so drastically different between STP1 and STP2. It would have been very confusing to lump it all into the one STP reporting submission history. So just bear that in mind if you are doing your initial STP2 submissions and you jump onto the portal and you're just in autopilot and you go to where you've always gone. Just be mindful that your STP2 will be in a separate area, and just click on that button instead. From an employee point of view, as I mentioned, there are some changes as to what they will see as far as MyGov is concerned. So previously there was just very limited information that would be seen, and they're going to get a lot more disaggregation of their information using the ATO's terminology. So there may be some questions from your employees that get a little bit confused if they looked at this today and then they look at it again in a few weeks' time when you've done your first STP2 submission. It may be a little confusing for them, so just be mindful of that, and perhaps be proactive with your employees and setting that expectation and tell them not to panic. And some of the resources, we'll send you these links through, and so there's just a few little shortcuts there, but as with pretty much everything these days, you can just go straight to your search engine. So if you misplace the links, just jump onto Google or whatever you use, and there's a couple examples there. So just if you're looking for something on the Sybiz website, just type Sybiz STP2 FAQ, or whatever it is, it could be Sybiz STP2 allowances, then you'll be able to get to what you need to get to relatively easily just using your search engine. So we're just rounding the corner now into the final part of the webinar. Just a prompt again about any questions. So we've had some people in the background just responding through Teams itself to some of the questions that have come through. As I mentioned, though, we haven't been able to get to all of them during this session. If you are watching the recording or think of something later, just a reminder to jump onto our website and use the web contact form to send some questions through. Of course, you can also go to your Sybiz business partners, particularly if it is to do with setting up pay items, etc. Your business partners are your first port of call. But other than that, we wish you all the best for STP2 reporting commencing on the 1st of November. And hopefully it's smooth sailing for everything. And just a final reminder that version 22.22 is coming out on Monday for those of you that need that version. So with that, I wish you all a fantastic weekend, and until next time when we chat about the version 23 release in November, we'll leave you to it. Thanks again. Bye.